Hello, everybody, and welcome to what is a bit of a special. As some of you may know, on Monday evenings from 6 till 8, I present a radio show with Lincoln City Radio called the Sports Zone Show, where we discuss all of the local and regional sport for Lincolnshire and indeed the United Kingdom as a whole. And a couple of weeks ago, we were lucky enough to get Steven Hallworth on the show. Now, Steven is a professional snooker player, the only professional, in fact, to ever come from the city of Lincoln, which is the city that I call home. Now, this was an absolutely fascinating conversation that I can't wait to share with you guys. Steven has played the likes of Mark Williams and Mark Selby and practiced with Ronnie O'Sullivan, so he knows his stuff when it comes to talking about the game of snooker. And he goes in depth about the financial side of it, the personal side of it, and the mental challenges that a snooker player is faced with. So I hope you'll listen intently to what is a fascinating interview with professional snooker player Steven Hallworth. Yes, that jingle can only mean one thing. We're back. It's the Sports Zone show, and here we are. It's our second show, in fact, of the new year. When do you stop saying Happy New Year? I'm not sure. I'm going to say it anyway. Happy New Year, everybody. I hope it's going nice and well for you. And what an exciting show we've got tonight. We've got one usual culprit and one very special guest. So on my left, the Lord of Fab, the fan advisory board at Lincoln City. It is Tony Smith. How you doing, mate? You all right?
I'm fine, Johnny. Yeah, a bit cold, but Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year to you, mate. It's very, very cold out there. Yeah, very chilly. But we've got a very special guest, as I alluded to earlier. We are joined tonight by Steven Hallworth, who is the first and only professional snooker player from Lincoln. How are you doing, my friend? You all right?
Yeah, I'm great, thank you. Yeah, yourself?
Great stuff. Yeah, I'm all good. Thank you for coming along. And I thought the best thing to do was to just start at the beginning, talk about how you got into snooker. So where did it all start? Where did the journey begin for you, mate?
Well, it was, my dad will tell you this, obviously I can't remember, but I was 4 years old. We was on a family holiday in Ibiza, just like on a little resort, and there was a pool table round sort of the bar area. Dad reckons that I just sort of went up to it and just picked up the cue and just started hitting the balls all right, and he popped me in like the little kiddie tournament, if you like, on the resort sort of thing, and I ended up coming runner-up to a 17-year-old, and obviously my dad was sat at the bar choking on his beer thinking he can play, so that was it.
Not a bad start was it 10 years of age you were? 10?
No, that was when I was 4.
4 years of age?
Yeah, so I was 4 then, and obviously we've come back to the UK. He's bought me like a little 6-foot table to have like at home, and then from 10 I was playing on the full-size tables.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
4 years of age beating a 17-year-old.
Runner up to a 17-year-old.
I mean, that's not bad at all, is it?
I know, it's good. And I've still got the certificate, actually, for it at home. That's like my best ever accolade.
Yeah, frame it. Never forget this. This is when it began. This is when it all started. I mean, when I was 4, Tony, I don't know about you, but I would have no chance around the pool table.
Pool table? No, never mind snooker. Yeah, exactly. I would say you'd need a long rest, I would think, for every shot, though, at that time, wouldn't you, Steve?
Yeah, it was definitely just hit and hope at that stage.
Well, you must have gone quite well with it, though. The hit and hoping must have got you quite far, as you're getting through the tournament and stuff. And you see those sort of young snooker players coming through, standing on like crates and boxes and stuff like that. Did you ever experience that sort of thing?
I didn't myself, but I do a lot of coaching nowadays, and a lot of youngsters that come to me, because the full size table, they are deceivingly big when you look at it on the telly, 12 by 6 foot, and they're quite high as well. So I've had a few kids that have come for coaching where they stand on crates, and I suppose if it works, it works. Eventually, they'll hopefully grow up.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen like some documentaries of players such as Ronnie, for example, sort of wheeling around a little crate with them and stuff. And it's crazy how you go from that and all the way through to professional. And speaking of which, what was the journey like? And what's the process of going from, right, I've got an interest, I'm pretty good at knocking balls in. How do you get professional?
Well, my earliest memory of sort of the first taste of professional snooker was 12. I won the Lincoln under-17s, and the prize for winning that was actually to play Mark Selby in an exhibition, who at the time was the Masters champion. And we played at the Terrier Tool Theatre, and there was like 10 of us that had a frame against Selby, and I remember like getting my waistcoat on and my bow tie and that. I had hair back there. I did my hair, and it was a real good occasion. I broke off, potted the white, and he's made 130 against me. So, but I loved every second of it, and it was from 12 years old. I've always loved the game, but I started to think, I want to practice it. I want to try and master it, get good. Stayed in school till I was 16. And then at 16, I started playing full time. And it was at that age where I really started to notice the improvements.
Was that a tough decision, though, to commit to going full time? Or did you know that's what I've got to do?
In the back of my head, it was the only thing I wanted to do. I sort of just glided my way through school. Like I did well enough. I got all my qualifications and stuff, but it was always a case of I'm going to be a snooker player. Obviously, the teachers were, you're never going to be a snooker player. It's not a job, sort of thing.
The usual, yeah.
But I was just obsessed with it, and my dad used to take me up to the club and. We'd be up at Waddington where my table was every hour that I could possibly be there. And then from 16 to 18, that was where I was really sort of travelling around Europe and the world competing until I eventually got my pro card at 17 to start the season at 18 on the professional tour.
Nice. And how do you get the pro card then?
There's a number of ways you can qualify, different routes. There's the qualifying school. Back then there was the European Tour, which I ended up winning to get my card. But yeah, there's so many different routes nowadays. The Q Tour is probably the best path. That's like in football terms, I suppose it's like the Premier League and the Championship. The Q Tour is the Championship to the professional tour. So, but again, it's events all around Europe and the world that you've got to compete in to. If you win it, you get your pro card.
Yeah. Well, there you go. So basically, keep winning. You'll get there in the end.
Yeah,
and is there do you go knocking on the door of these tournaments to get involved in them, or do people come and find you, or how do you sort of enter into the early stages of sort of the Q School or the European tours, early doors in your career?
It was just a case, I was travelling around playing a lot of pro-ams, what they call, like professional amateur events where, they'd just be like 1 day, 2 day events. My dad used to drive us around and, we'd just find any tournament to play in, and then you get to know about different routes, and obviously my level was increasing all the time. So it was a case of like, there is only 128 pros in the world, but I always fancied myself to get in that group because I was playing to that level at such a young age. And obviously you've got to believe in yourself, and I was lucky enough that my dad and my mum really supported me with it and pushed me all the way, and I just had to keep practicing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, only 128 pros, and I'm sure, Tony, we could relate this to football a little bit, the drive and determination that I suppose you'd have to get there.
Yeah, that was one thing I was going to ask Steve, actually. What natural ability and training, where's the balance there between being a good player? You've got to have a certain degree, like any sportsman or woman. I would think that you've got to have some natural ability, but practice as much as you can to get better, or can you get a bit stale, and can you practice too much if you're not too careful?
You can, yeah, definitely. And I think just referencing back to when I was such a young age at 4 picking up a cue, that is natural ability.
Yeah.
My dad noticed that in me. There's a lot of players on the tour. You look at Ronnie O'Sullivan, Jack Lazowski, Judd Trump. They're some of the most naturally gifted players you'll ever see, but they work very hard at their game. I think natural ability will only ever get you so far, but you've got to put the work in, because if you want to win tournaments, natural ability isn't going to get you over the line. It's the hours and hours on the practice table of honing your skills, learning how to deal with that pressure. You're not born with that. You've got to work on that. You're born to play snooker, I believe. I've always felt that I've got that natural ability. Yeah.
Yeah. As far as practicing is concerned, far easier to practice against somebody else rather than on your own, I would have thought. Is that true?
I would say that you need to do both, definitely. But when I was younger, I probably spent too much time practicing on my own. And then as I got onto the professional ranks, to be fair, to start with, I was just getting, battered week in, week out. The players were just too good. And it was because I wasn't putting myself and testing myself against those guys. So in recent years, I've been travelling about and playing a lot more people, which I think is more important than the solo practice now.
Yeah, creates that bit of competitiveness, even though you're practicing, I suppose, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Who's the best player you've played against, do you think, or your hardest opponent?
I've played against them all, but the best player to ever practice with was Ronnie, because he was my hero and I got to watch him up close. Although again, I was just fishing balls out all day for him, which wasn't great. But but the hardest person I've ever played against is Mark Selby, and I do genuinely believe he's
granite,
isn't he? Yeah, but what you see on the telly is how he's playing in these big events. That's what he's like down the club on a cold, wet Tuesday afternoon. it's a joke how good he is. Like, he wants to win. You could be playing for nothing in the club and he'll still want to win. You could be playing for a cup of tea and he'll try his hardest. That's how good it is.
Well, I suppose I was going to ask you that from a style point of view, because, you know, Selby is seen as this tactician of the game who doesn't throw away any cheap, you know, chances, great safety game. Granite is the word they use, isn't it?
Yeah.
Stephen Hendry uses that word a lot. Or you've got like a Ronnie who's a bit more flair and potting balls and getting in amongst the balls. Where do you sit on that, and what gives you that sort of pizzazz? What do you enjoy watching from your point of view?
I like watching the attacking snooker, but because I'm a player, I can appreciate Mark Selby, you know, and how he goes about his business. There's a lot of people you see on social media say Selby's a boring player to watch, and, you know, he's never going to be as good looking to say your Jack Lazowski's, Judd Trump, Ronnie O'Sullivan. He doesn't play that style of snooker, but look at his CV.
It wins.
He's not done too badly.
Is he four-time champ?
Yeah,
Selby?
world champion. Yeah, and he's got a ridiculous CV as well. So there's place in the game for all styles of snooker, without a doubt.
100%. And we spoke earlier on, we alluded to the practice, you know, you've got the natural talent, but you need to put the work in. I was going to ask you, how much like work does that feel? Because obviously it's your passion, it's what you enjoy doing, and snooker's a massive part of your life. Does it feel like hard graft, or does it feel like you're just enjoying it all the time?
Yeah, it never feels like work. You know, I can get out of bed.
That must be lovely, though.
It's unbelievable, yeah. And we had this conversation down the club this afternoon. You know, I'm incredibly blessed to be able to do what I do, you know, play snooker. I get up in the morning. Don't get me wrong, I treat it like a job. I won't lay in and, you know, just miss it off. I'll be there down the club, and I treat it like a job. I always have done, but it never ever once feels like a job. The day it feels like that will be the day I put my key down.
That's when you pack it in. Yeah, absolutely. And how many hours would you put in? Because you get different players talk about you can over practice, you can do too much, and some people, you know, don't do enough. I mean, Ronnie's a very rare example of someone who can just kind of turn up and be all right, but he's gone months without practicing and turning up to events. You know, where do you sit on that?
You can definitely over practice, yeah, and I've probably done that myself in the past, because I was always a case of. I think the best phrase I've ever come to terms with was, "Don't count the hours, make the hours count." Because when I first left school, I was like, right, I've got to be down the club 8 o'clock, leave at 5. I've done a day's work, but I was just hitting balls all day. It was pointless. Whereas now my practice is more constructive. If I do a good, real, like solid 3-4 hours where I really feel like I've tested myself and done what I needed to do, that's enough. You don't need to keep playing.
There you go. It's about making those hours count, people. That's our first bit of advice that we've got in tonight. We'll have a few of those little sort of nuggets of advice that will drop in for any aspiring snooker players. You play a bit, don't you, Tony? You've played a bit of snooker.
A little bit in my youth, yeah. My father was in the RAF, so fortunately, we were talking about it earlier, Steve and myself, a lot of the sergeants' messes tend to have snooker tables and good facilities. So I used to play at RAF Swinderby quite a lot, actually, down there before it became Witham St Hughes, so that was always good fun, but it didn't mean I was ever any good at it. But
that's the thing.
Practice didn't make me a lot better. I don't think I had the natural ability that you've got, but very enjoyable. Yeah. And,
well, I'm actually going for a game of snooker tonight with my dad. So if I can make above 15, I'll be happy. I'll take that. I'll be made up with that. But probably not. Unlikely. But you know, we'll see how we go.
No, I used to celebrate putting 2 balls in a row. That was an achievement for me. So I know how you feel.
There's quite literally levels to this game, I think it's fair to say. Well, we'll be back after a bit of music to talk more snooker with Steve. But for now, it's time for a bit of My Sharona. Yes, welcome back one and all. Welcome back to the Sports Zone. That was My Sharona, and we're back here with Steven Hallworth, the snooker player from Lincoln, the only one, in fact. And of course, we've got Tony as well from the Fan Advisory Board. Let's not forget about him. But Steven, we were having a little chat in the break there, off air, about your first venue event in your first season, wasn't it, in fact? And you had a bit of a baptism of fire, didn't you?
Yeah, it was a one to remember for sure. But again, it goes back to like when you're a kid and you're dreaming of those events. I played Mark Williams at the Barbican in York in the UK Championship, but it was actually my first ever pro game as an amateur. The season I got my pro card was in Belgium, and it was against Mark Williams.
Wow.
It's the same, it's the same event that I won to get my pro card, and then the next season I was playing him at the Barbican. So it was a bit surreal, really.
And just what was it like? A televised game against a multiple world champion, a legend, I think we would say Mark would qualify as now. How was that?
It was bizarre, really, because I put myself under so much pressure as if I had any chance of winning. Yeah. It was like, what am I doing? I'm just a kid. Go out and enjoy it. But I did put myself under it. But one thing that stuck with me is just how good those top players are out there, because the game is so different out there on the TV table. You've got the lights, the glare of the ball is different, the table play is different, everything is different, and they make it look so easy, and it's incredible.
Experience, I suppose, would play into that. And do you think that's, once you've played a few televised games under the lights, do you think that changes your mentality and just a bit more confidence going out to the table?
Definitely. That's what it's all about. If you can get out there on the match table as much as possible, you'll eventually learn how to adapt and deal with those conditions. But until then, it's like you've just got to keep serving your apprenticeship and work your way through. A lot of the players, look at Kyron Wilson, for example. Now he's at the top of the game, but for a lot of years he was out in the shed playing on the tables in the leisure centres and stuff, and he's had to earn his right there, and he has done.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you feel like when you get to the televised games and the big tournaments, there's a different approach to the game, a different way of playing, perhaps? Sort of match play snooker, does it change approach-wise?
I think it's easy to think that would be the thing to do, but and it's easy to sort of fall into that trap. But the best way that you can go about it is just to play your natural game. And often, I've done it myself in the past. I've gone against the top players and think, I need to try and shut up shop a little bit or do something differently, when actually it's the wrong way of going about it. You've got to play to your own strengths and play your own game. At the end of the day, you're playing the table and the game. You're not playing them. They're just in the other chair. It doesn't matter who's sat there. You've still got to play the balls that are in front of you. That's
a really interesting point that you make about you don't think about, or you shouldn't think about who you're playing. You just play the balls in front of you. So do you just, if it's Mark Selby in the other chair, do you just have to forget about that, really?
Yeah, and I think, you look at Ronnie O'Sullivan, right? It doesn't matter who you are. You're 1-0 down before you've even hit a ball against Ronnie, because you're playing Ronnie, and you're automatically thinking that he's Ronnie, he's the greatest ever, he's going to do this, he's going to do that. When actually he might miss and give you a chance, but you're not thinking correctly because you're thinking about who you're playing. Yeah. And I think it's important to try and stay as present as possible. Look at what's in front of you. A bit cliche, it's one ball at a time.
Yeah, absolutely. And the amount of times you see it, you mentioned Ronnie there, but other top players as well, when they do miss and they give maybe an opponent that's not got as much of an aim for themselves, they give them a chance, but because maybe the mentality isn't quite there, they can't capitalise, when they're not perhaps playing as well. But I suppose another question would be, when they are on form and you're playing a top player, when you're sat there in your chair, because a lot gets made of the mental side of snooker, where if your opponent's playing well, you could spend hours sat in your chair and not playing a shot, not knocking a ball in. You can go a long time without potting a ball. So what are you telling yourself? What are you thinking to try and stay in the right mindset in that moment?
Where's the nearest door so I can get out of here as quickly as possible, basically. Yeah. But no, it's easy to like you say, snooker for me is I'm obviously biased, but it's definitely one of the hardest games for that exact reason. You can be sat in your chair and there's nothing you can do while they're at the table, and it's important to try and again stay as present as possible and keep being as positive as possible as well, because if they do miss, you've then got to step up and capitalise straight away. You've got to learn very quickly on the job against those top guys, and that's what makes it so tough.
Yeah, I mean, Tony, I couldn't imagine the pressure of being sat in your chair for so long, not getting your eye in, your technique. You haven't got a chance to work on it because you're not in the rhythm, and suddenly your opponent finally misses, and you've got to step up. I mean, I can't imagine.
Yeah, I suppose it's like a goalkeeper in football who's not had a shot to save for 90-odd minutes, and then suddenly the game's still 0-0 for some reason, or very tight, and he's got to pull off a good save. I mean, the difference is, and we respected it when we did our sports awards a few weeks ago, you're a sportsman on your own. You've got to motivate yourself. You've got to build up your confidence. You've got to have that resilience. So if you have a few bad results or whatever, or a tournament or a match doesn't go particularly well, how do you get back into it?
Yeah, I think I'm lucky in that respect that I'm quite a very self-motivated person, and I can always, like I say, I always get out of bed in the morning. I always got a plan. I know what I'm going to do. But a lot of the pros and players that are trying to get there struggle with that, because like you say, it's all on you to do it, and you can go for a long period of time where you could basically just lose matches day in, day out, week in, week out, and constantly going to tournaments in a bad frame of mind. It is a really lonely place to be fair.
Yeah. Sometimes you need a break, I suppose, do you, for your own good?
Pardon the pun.
Yes. It's very funny there without realising it.
Yeah, no, but you're right. It's important to try and, just be as open-minded as possible with it, because at the end of the day, it's a game of snooker, and there's more important things in life. But you've got to look after yourself out there, because it is tough. And I've struggled with it in the past. Man, I've been in some really dark places with snooker, to be fair. But I've learned to know where the game is in my life now, and there is bigger things out there.
Because you're on your own. You're not like you're in a team or a squad where you've got a manager and coaches to pick you up.
Yeah.
It's not, you control your own destiny, which is a good position to be in a lot of ways. But like you say, you've got to have that self-motivation, haven't you, to carry on. And we were talking about it earlier, weren't you, with a lot of travelling you've done with snooker, and how at times it can become difficult. It's a very lonely profession. It's not as glamorous as it sounds, is it, at times? Yeah,
and I suppose it's the same with anything. You watch the TV and you watch the top players and the success that they get, but what goes unnoticed is all the hours of down the club, early mornings, late nights, losses that people don't see, and that's where champions are made, I think. It's the work that you do in the shadows that, you've got to earn your moment in the light, I suppose. That's the hard part about it, and the best part about it, because that's what makes it all worthwhile. Yeah.
World Championships coming up in April, as usual, every year at the Crucible. How do you get through to that? What's the qualifying procedure for that?
The qualifiers are like the week or two before. So basically, everyone outside the top 16 plays off at the Ponds Forge in Sheffield. It's a venue just down the road. I was one game away a couple of seasons ago. I lost to Gary Wilson in the last round. So that's how you get through. Just get through those grueling 2 weeks of qualifying.
Right.
And then you've got to go and play at the tournament itself. You do a little mini tournament, which is it's no mean feat, is it, to get through there? That's a difficult process. Then you've got to play at the World Championships. It must be a danger of maybe even burnout at that point.
Yeah,
maybe.
Massively. It's one of the biggest tests for sure, because the qualifiers are like 14 days and then the main event is 17 days. So you basically competing for like a month, really. One of my closest friends, Jamie Clark from Wales, he actually had a real good run a couple of seasons ago, where he started in round one of qualifying. He'd won 4 best of 19s to get to Sheffield. Then he ended up winning his first round game against Mark Allen, I believe it was. So he got to the last 16, and he was there for such a long period of time. He lost so much weight, and he was really, really ill, and because he was just in that mental stress. Snooker is stressful, and you're living out of a suitcase. You're not eating right because you're nervous, and it was just a continuous thing. And he was really poorly actually when he got home because of that.
And that's maybe the side of it that you perhaps don't see as much, isn't it? I mean, there have been some comments from top players even about the grueling nature of the lifestyle of a snooker player, and possibly difficulties to make ends meet with prize money. Have you ever had difficulties with that? And do you relate to any of those comments? And do you sometimes think, well, it's easy for you to say, or how do you feel about that? Yeah,
I think I spoke out quite a lot in recent years about the snooker itself, because I was ranked in the top 128 in the world, and I was at a loss at the end of the season. It was like we weren't getting paid because we weren't winning, basically. But it's hard when you're playing number 1 in the world, number 2 in the world in the first round, and you're paying all this money in expenses, and our contracts, we're entertainers. We have to entertain. We're going, we're travelling, we're doing a job. My argument was I could play Ronnie O'Sullivan in the first round of the UK Championships. I could sell out the stadium. I could make 5 century breaks and lose 6-5 and go home. I've done all my expenses. I've done my money on that, and I've gone home with nothing. There's tickets there, etc. So I have spoken out a lot about it. And to be fair to World Snooker, they've addressed it. There's now a guaranteed figure on offer for players that get on the tour. So at least now that players coming through the ranks, they know that their expenses are going to be covered.
That's good. And do you feel like, your concerns, if directed in the right channels, will be listened to then?
Yeah, definitely. I think, to be fair, I've done a lot of interviews with local media and also national media about it, because it was really, really tough. And I think that's why a lot of players struggled mentally. I had a job behind a bar for the whole of my early career, because for that reason. I had to pay for my snooker somehow. I was very lucky in a way that I had a few companies locally that sponsored me for some events, and without that sort of support, players just would not be able to play. So I think they've finally listened and they've started to realise that it is tough.
Yeah, it's good to hear that they are listening to you. But, you know, Tony, you're hearing those stories of how tough it is, not just from a competition side, but there are so many things that you don't see.
Yeah, I've heard it from other sports people in the past, particularly Speedway, for example. I understand that's another sport where you need to be winning in order to make any money out of it. And the danger is, from what you've just been saying, Steve, that younger potential good players will probably drop out of the sport at an early age and will never be seen again when they could have really good potential.
Yeah, so I could reel off actually a long list of players that I grew up with that at the time you would look at them and think they're an absolute dead cert to be world champion one day. They were that good, but for that reason they couldn't afford to play. They maybe didn't have the financial backing that some other players get. They didn't have families that were supporting. Whatever the reason was, and they stopped playing.
It's a real shame. Yeah.
Massive shame.
How do you go about getting sponsorship then?
Well, it's really, really tough for an individual sports person to get it. But I think the best thing I ever did was get the job in the bar. Yeah. Because I met so many different people from working a shift where one day I'm pouring them a pint of beer, the next day I'm on telly and they'd see me and like, you served me a pint last night. And then you get chatting and that relationship builds. And I think it was the best thing I ever did.
And they know somebody else who can help them. Yeah. It's the best way. Yeah.
Is it still a similar sort of networking process that you go through now, or, you know, to get sponsorship? What's the process now that you've had a few events and you've made a bit of a name for yourself? Yeah,
and I think that's it. You know, you're only as good as your last result, and as long as the results keep coming, then people are always going to, you know, see your name about. And it's, you know, I'm a local sportsman, and if I can get support from local people, local companies, then it's a win-win situation for everyone, I think. And like I say, the Lincoln City Football Club have been brilliant with me to sort of promote me on their platforms. And my sponsor, TR Weston, the steel fabricator in Lincoln, they've been unbelievable with me. You know, they've travelled about all around the world to come and watch me as well. They really, really want to see me do well. So it's people like that, you know, if I didn't have that, there's no way I'd be playing today.
And you mentioned you're only as good as your last result, and you had a pretty decent recent result, didn't you, at the snooker shootout? Could you tell us a little bit about the format and, you know, the run that you went on, of course?
Yeah, it's a mad event. If you've never seen the shootout, it's I would definitely advise watching it because it's crazy. It's a one frame knockout, 10-minute frame. We play a shot clock, so you get 15 seconds for the first 5 minutes, 10 seconds for the next 5 minutes. It's played in like a darts atmosphere, so the crowd can make as much loud as they want. You know, everyone's having a good time, having a drink. And yeah, it's a straight knockout. Win or lose, you're either through or you're going home.
And do you like that sort of thing? So there have been, you know, there's always detractors with this sort of thing about, you know, the game and the gentlemanly aspect of it. But do you feel like that's, you know, it's just a bit of fun? How do you see that event?
I personally really, really like it. And I think there's a place for it on the calendar because what it does is it opens up another avenue of people to the game that maybe think snooker's a little bit boring, but they can see that and you know, just have a bit of fun with it.
It's a bit like T20 in cricket, hasn't it? It's brought a different audience to cricket, and potentially this can do the same with snooker, whether it be an audience at the event or on TV as well. It's certainly got potential. And it takes us back, we were talking earlier about Pot Black, the programme that used to be on when they used to have a frame of snooker on TV. I think it's how snooker first came onto TV, to be honest, before it became the highly watched sport. And it used to be 20-25 minutes to get for a frame of snooker. Now they could do it in 10 minutes. Brilliant television, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like I say, I think there's a place for it on the calendar. It's something that a lot of the players get behind. Okay, some of the top players don't enter it because to them the prize money is not as good as they would like, but for everyone else it's fantastic. At the end of the day, you've got to win 6 frames of snooker. You can win. It's a ranking event. There's £50,000. You know, it changes your career. It changes your life if you win that. So you've got to be in it to win it.
You did well, didn't you?
Yeah, you know, I got to the semi-finals last month in Swansea, which was my first ever ranking event semi. So, you know, I was 2 games away from lifting a title. And it's funny, actually, I woke up on that morning and something just felt right that day. Yeah. And I spoke to Glyn and Claire, my sponsors, TR Western, and I said to them, like, they were gutted because they couldn't be there because they was at the Moscone Cup of Paul. It clashed with the same day, and I said, mate, I am bringing this trophy home tonight. Like, something just feels right. And then throughout the day, little things in that format, if you foul, it's ball in hand, so it's quite savage in that respect. And players were just making elementary mistakes against me. Dominic Dale in the quarterfinals, he's like does so well in that event. He miscued, and it was like, that never happens.
There's no time to recover from that, is there?
Is that the pressure of an audience, a louder audience, and also the pressure of time restraints as well? I suppose some people can't adapt to it as well as others.
And I think if you don't think quickly on your feet and you don't see the shot quickly and you start trying to work out different options, you've got no chance. You've just got to play on instinct almost.
Did you practice specifically for that event then, or for when you're in those tournaments?
Not really, no.
Way?
I play quite quickly anyway, to be fair. So 15 seconds and 10 seconds doesn't feel quick to me. I think going back to the conversation about a natural player, I think if you naturally see the shots quickly, you're going to do all right in that event, because as you're walking around the table, I know what shot I'm going to play before it's even got there, so I've always got a good chance of doing well in that event.
I couldn't see Cliff Thorburn or Steve Davis getting on very well in that format, to be honest.
It suits certain players, I guess another player you wouldn't expect to see in that, or maybe Mark Selby, that sort of safety game, less attacking, wouldn't really suit it, I suppose.
Yeah, and that, again, he's never really done anything in that event. He plays in it, but he's never done well, so there's definitely a theory behind it,
Yeah, so different people doing different things on different tables and different formats. So there you go, people. We're going to take a quick musical break with a little bit of Rick Astley. Can't go wrong with a little bit of Rick Astley. Yes, you are still listening to the Sports Zone here on LCR FM. We're back with Tony and we're back with Steve, chatting all things snooker in the first hour of the show here. And I just wanted to talk to you, Steve, a little bit about some of the media training that you would get as a snooker player. What's that all about? And is it enjoyable? And what sort of stuff do they teach you?
Well, it's good, and it's basically for moments like this, I suppose, to be able to sit here and actually converse with you guys. A lot of the young kids that would sort of burst onto the scene, as good as snooker players as they were, they could never sit in front of a panel of interviewees or newspapers and stuff. They'd just like crumble, and it was always one-word answers and stuff. So the media training was all about, first of all, how to deal with media, how to speak to media, how to portray yourself on social media as well, because there's a lot of rules and regulations we have to adhere to on there. Just learn how to use the media to your advantage. The media is here to help raise our profiles, and it's about having that relationship with the media to make it successful.
Yeah, and I suppose when you had that recent run to the semis in the shootout, I'm guessing you got quite a bit of attention after that.
Yeah, it was huge actually, and it was more than I thought, and as well, like on site in the Eurosport studios, and with all the TV companies, and then all the interviews you've got to do after as well. It's it was almost like a little bit of a taste of what it's like to be a top player, I suppose, that are getting that all the time. They're just hounded non-stop by the media, and I loved it obviously because it was a bit new to me, but I suppose it could get a little bit annoying at
all the time.
Yeah. But
did that help you sort of move, because we've discussed off air as well that you've made a little bit of a move into commentary as well. Is that something that branched out of the media side of things, the media training, and do you see that as being a bit of an avenue outside of snooker for you?
Yeah, definitely. It came about actually. Matchroom, we have an event, Championship League, once a season, and Matchroom sort of put the feelers out to email to a lot of the players and said, look guys, we're going to trial a bit of commentary, like co-commentating with some of the experts that do it full time, who's interested. And surprisingly, not many players actually got back to them. I was well up for it. I thought it was a great, for that reason, it's another avenue, and as well, you're watching snooker, you're learning as well, because you're watching the top players. So I had a trial a couple of seasons ago and it went really well, and they've kept asking me back, so I must have done something all right.
That's good. So what sort of events were you covering? What stations were you involved in? And did you find yourself working alongside some top players, top ex-players as well, maybe?
Yeah, it was funny actually, because to start with I was like co-commentator, but I was in as the expert, if you like. The main commentator had never been a snooker player. Dave Hendon and Phil Yates, they do a lot of work for like Eurosport, and we was like Free Sports, Viaplay, Matchroom Live, YouTube as well, a lot on there. But then obviously as it progressed, they started to put me onto lead comms. Was doing a lot of lead comms where actually I was getting the players in. So like I was sat in the commentary box with like Sean Murphy, Stuart Bingham, and I was the one asking them the question. And it was weird because I was thinking I could learn a thing or two off you, to be fair. But it was good because it was good experience for me, and it's gone really, really well.
Nice. And what are they, those top players like as analysts? Do you feel like they have an angle on the game that you don't see sometimes? Do they call a shot or suggest a shot that you maybe wouldn't have played, or is there a different mentality there?
I think when you get to a certain level at the game, there's a right and a wrong shot, and I think a lot of the players, probably 90% of the tour, can see that. Right. So for me, it was always a case like I could always see the shots, and that was why it went well to start with. But just listening to the top guys in there as well, seeing how they would go about making a break, because there are different ways to attack things, and some players are more aggressive than others, and it's interesting to see like what players would maybe go into the pack of reds at what time. Others might try and chip away at it's I suppose it's the beauty behind the game. It's like trying to unlock that puzzle, and it's interesting to see what those guys do about it.
I suppose everyone will have a slightly different perspective on that way of going about break building. There's been some talk about Sean Murphy as name has come up quite a bit with regards to doing work with the BBC during tournaments about how it might detract from the attention that he's able to put onto his game. Do you find that you would be able to commentate, and have you done it during a tournament where you're playing, or could you do that? And do you think it would take your eye off the ball a little bit?
Yeah, it's a bit of it's one of them for me. I don't actually agree with what Sean's done there. Particularly at the Masters this week, Ronnie was there for the taking.
He was.
He was not playing good snooker, and Sean was in the studio till 1 a.m. that night, so he wouldn't have got to bed till 2. So he's missed a trick there. Whatever he's getting paid, it's not as much as he would have got paid if he'd have won the title, and Murphy could have won that title. So until somebody wins an event, being in the studio or in the commentary box, I'll never agree with it.
Would you do it, Tony?
Oh yeah, I'm sure I would do it. I'd love to do it. I think the difficulty with snooker commentary is you've got to know when to be quiet at the right time, haven't you?
Yeah.
You don't need too many words around it, otherwise you can spoil the whole atmosphere of the game.
Yeah, and that's right. To be fair, there are a few commentators that have annoyed me in the past for that reason, where they just can't stop talking. It's like, just let me watch.
Yeah. Just like somebody coughing in the audience, for example, isn't it? When you watch it on TV, it can be annoying.
Do they have? I've always theorised on this, and I think it's probably a pretty obvious answer. But at the big events, I sometimes see members of the crowd with earpieces in. So are they listening to the commentary then? Is that what's happening? Because you've been to the Crucible, haven't you?
Yeah.
Do you have an earpiece in with the commentators on?
Yeah. So there's for those events, there's commentators on site, so they're in the box there, and what they're saying, you can listen to that live. So that's a pretty cool thing to have, I think.
And you sometimes get the commentator will crack a joke, and the crowd will start laughing, and the players will be like, "Hey, what's that?" Because obviously they can't hear it.
Yeah.
So that's a funny aspect of it. But yeah. So I mean, when it comes to Sean, do you think he'll continue to do this? Do you think maybe he's seen that he's in the twilight of his career and maybe starting to think about after snooker? And is that something you've done yourself as well?
Yeah, I think Sean's just that kind of character where he just loves the limelight. He's an entertainer. Like, I get on really well with Sean. He's coming to Lincoln to do an exhibition soon, and we've set up like a practice session for in the day. So I get on really well with Sean, but he just loves that sort of. He has to
limelight.
be. He's got to be he walks out into his sparkly suit. He's just one of those people, and I think he just will always like the media side of it. And it's just not for me. If I was in the semi-finals of a Masters playing against an out of form Ronnie,
full focus,
I'd be in bed with cucumbers on my eyes by 8 p.m. Don't you worry about that.
Knocked out in the semi-final, then you would willingly do the commentary on the final.
Absolutely,
Next best thing,
100%.
isn't it?
If I was out of the event, then I've got no problems with that whatsoever.
Yeah.
Well, it's just a tricky kind of line to balance, isn't it? Because it's another avenue financially as well, I suppose, doing the commentary. But at the end of the day, you're a snooker player, so the focus has got to be there. Yeah. But you kind of understand why he's gone down that route and what the thinking is there. I mean, Tony, when you watch the snooker, what kind of analysts do you listen to? What's your because I personally find I think it's John Virgo with the where's the cue ball going? Where's the cue ball going? I quite like that one.
He's been doing it for years. He did the Big Break programme that was on TV. It was Saturday evening peak time entertainment many years ago, wasn't it? After Pot Black, and I think he's got a sense of humour. You've got to have that sense of humour, haven't you? And then you've got the steady voice. What, was it Ted Lowe with the guy, the original commentator? I remember watching Pot Black in black and white. For those of you watching in black and white, the pink ball is behind the brown. Classic commentary like that. It's fantastic.
In the game, Steve, who are your sort of chums? Maybe some name drop for us a little bit. Who are the high profile people that you've really got on with?
To be fair, Mark Selby is probably one of the ones I've really sort of taken to. And to be fair, for a top player, you wouldn't know he was a top player. Like if we were sat in a hotel or a bar or anything, like he always comes up to the younger guys and sits with us and chats. So I've always got on well with Mark. There's a lot of lads that I've sort of grown up with. That we've, obviously we're all, but the snooker tour is just one big family. I think there's not that you never see friendship groups, like it's not cliquey at all. Everyone gets on because everyone appreciates what everyone's going through. When we're traveling abroad, we're traveling together. When we're in this country, we're staying with one another. So it's just one big family, really.
Close knit then.
Yeah, massively. Yeah, and I think that's why. And there's obviously the odd few. Ronnie keeps himself to himself. No one ever sees him. He comes and plays his game and he leaves. Yeah. But even Sean Murphy, I get on really well with him. There's Ben Wollaston out at Leicester. He's a top 32 player. There's a lot of guys that I've really sort of gelled with, and they see you. Once you've been around for a bit, they start to think, well, maybe he's here to stay, so we'll get on all right with him.
Given the time of day, almost. Yeah. Well, we also mentioned, Steve, that you're relocating. Is that right? A practice table? Are you bringing that into the city? What's the situation there?
Yeah, so it was a bit of an unfortunate situation, I suppose, but possibly a very fortunate situation out of it. My practice facility up at RAF Waddington, actually, when the bad weather came, it sort of just flooded. Really, the roof caved in. It was a bit of a bad one. So we had to get the table out of there, and I was looking for somewhere to house it for a while. And the Lincoln Snooker Club, Phil Cross, I'm going to have to give him a mention because he's been brilliant with me, to be fair. He's wanted me there for a long time, but I think because I've had it so good where my table was, there was just no real value to me to leave. But because
you get used to it, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. And I sort of had my own place. It was 24/7 access. It was parking. It was easy for me to do that. But this has sort of forced my hand, and Phil's welcomed me into the club. He's given me practice for free for a couple of months to sort of find my feet with it, get to know the members, and everyone in there has been class, And obviously, since playing in there, I had that good run to the shootout. So straight away, it was like the club was all behind me. It was buzzing in there. People were watching, and then I come back in the next week, and everyone was just got behind me. So yeah, the table's going to be moving into Lincoln Snooker Club soon.
Cool. Do you feel like they're might be something to say for going to that club, having that support, and then having a good run? It might have played a part in it.
Yeah, and a few of the members have actually said that. It may well have done, who knows, I think it's allowed me to sort of learn how to deal with playing in a club atmosphere, as daft as that sounds, because where my table was, it was just me in a room, no atmosphere, dead silence, and that was it. Whereas now, there's things going on, there's people talking, people playing. I'm having to focus a little bit more, but at the same time, it's more enjoyable. So it's a good one. I think it can't possibly be a bad thing for me.
Yeah, and do you find it maybe simulates an actual match day scenario a bit better because you at least got some eyes on you?
Yeah, definitely. Bizarrely, even in practice, I had a couple of games with Phil the other day, and to be fair to Phil, I was absolutely flying. I hardly missed a ball against him, but I was getting to the 100 mark, and I did start to feel nervous, as daft as that sound, because I knew that 10, 20 people were watching, and they all wanted me.
They wanted the century.
They wanted the century, and I was thinking, don't miss that. No, don't miss now. But yeah, I just kept knocking them in all afternoon, and I was loving it because they were loving it as well. So
great stuff. Yeah.
Talk about facilities, and you're enjoying playing at Lincoln Snooker Club at the moment. where tournaments are played, they seem to be concentrated on certain arenas, don't they? I know I was at was it Milton Keynes? They do it, York quite a lot, as well as the Crucible, for example. Alexandra Palace got a bit of criticism, hasn't it, about its facilities for the
from one particular player.
Yeah, I noticed. Is there any venue you prefer to play at?
It's a tough one because I've played at a lot of venues in the UK, a lot of venues around Europe as well. But I think the best venues are always the ones where the crowd, you can get the crowd in. The biggest place, like York, is fantastic. You know, the Barbican, it's right bang in the city centre. There's a lot of crowd in there. They really get behind it.
Yeah.
And you can just, after your game, there's plenty to do around there. A few years ago, as good as Milton Keynes was, that was our COVID year where we was locked down in that hotel and we spent the full season there. And it was nice, but there was no atmosphere whatsoever and there was nothing to do around there.
No, they were having a major... when Lincoln played at Milton Keynes this time last year, actually, there was a major darts tournament going on at the same time at the weekend when we were in the hotel. So,
to be fair, when the snooker was going on, they had a lot of darts tournaments on, and all the top players, Van Gogh and everyone, we used to see them all coming in and out, carrying the crates of beer.
Would it be great, though, to have a major snooker tournament, for example, in Lincolnshire eventually, or to find a new venue?
It would be incredible, and to be fair, the work that Phil has done at the club, and I've started coaching, and it was always my goal to give back to grassroots in Lincoln. If there was a venue good enough and big enough that World Snooker saw fit, then there's no reason why they can't, because they're having them everywhere now.
Yeah.
Make it happen, people. Make it, whoever can, start having those conversations.
It would be exciting.
It would be great, wouldn't it? So, Steve, just wondering, looking forward, new year, relocation of the practicing. What does the future look like? What events have you got coming up? What's the plan?
Well, I was just saying off air actually how busy it's been sort of since September. There's been basically an event every weekend, and it's carried on, the straight into the new year. I've got a big event actually coming up in February, a couple of weeks' time in Albania. It's the World Championship, which can, if you win it, you can get your professional card back into the pro ranks. So that's 10 days out in Albania. Failing that, I've got some playoffs in Bosnia. For the Q Tour, so I've finished in the playoff places for that. So if you win the playoffs, there's a card, and then failing that, there's Q School. So there's so many different routes. Yeah, there's lots and lots of routes. Hopefully, get the job done in Albania in a couple of weeks.
Nice and early, then you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, I can put my feet up then.
Yeah, you can chill out. A lot of travelling. I know we mentioned this earlier, but that must be taxing at times.
It is, it is, because you're constantly just living out a suitcase, and it does get a bit tedious at times. And being away from the family and the missus, and we've got a little puppy at the minute, so it's pretty tough. But it's hard because, again, you're on your own, really. You're all playing against one another, as many friends as you could have. They are your competitors at the end of the day, and they want to beat you, you want to beat them. So, it's hard, but it's part and parcel of the job, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So later on tonight, actually, I'm going to go for a game of snooker with my dad. And as a complete novice, complete amateur, I was wondering if you could give me and any listeners who might be wanting to get started, maybe 3 to 5 real top tips that you think would be important advice, wisdom to impart upon these people on their, their blossoming journey through snooker.
Okay, so it's pretty much on the spot, this one. But I think the best bit of advice I can give to any player, whether they've never picked a cue up before or they've played a lot, is find a way that works for you. So whatever feels natural to you is going to be the right way to play. So people always talk to me and come to coaching with me, and they mention this textbook way of playing. Right. It's nonsense. There is no textbook way of playing. There's no two players that play the game the same. So find a way that feels comfortable to you, but also something that you can repeat. If you can repeat it, it will be consistent, which means you can get to a level. Try and find the middle of the white. Try and find centre of the cue ball, because that's going to help. If you're imparting any side spin, you're going to struggle. And just try not to do too much. Focus on one thing at a time. Try and pot that red first before potting that red and screwing back for that black. Just baby steps.
It's too soon to start plotting the entire break.
It's
like, make sure you pot the ball first. I mean, that must happen quite a lot though, when you see a player thinking about position, miss the pot.
Yeah, I do it all the time.
It's all part of it, isn't it? It's all part of it. I mean, there's another debate I've seen. Hendry's got this brilliant YouTube channel where he just chats with, various pros. And the debate between your last glance, is it at the cue ball or the object ball? Do you have a preference on that?
Again, it's something that it crops up all the time, and people think there's a right and wrong way of doing it. I look at the cue ball when I strike, but the textbook will tell you you've got to look at the object ball, because how do you know where you're going to hit? Yeah. But my eyes flick very quickly between the object ball and cue ball on impact. Ronnie O'Sullivan is exactly the same. Yeah.
Hendry's also, he said, was a cue ball.
Yeah. So there's no right or wrong way of doing it. It goes back to what I just mentioned. Find the way that works for you, because that's going to, at the end of the day, you could get to any level and try every different cue action in the world, but under pressure, when it matters, you're going to revert back to whatever feels comfortable and natural. Yeah, so why not master that way?
There you go, people. Find what works for you and make sure you're comfortable with it and make sure you repeat it. Watch me take that advice from a professional, go and play my dad and miss every ball. Yeah. That's what's probably going to happen. But Steve, thank you so much for coming in. It's been great to chat to you about snooker. I mean, I'm a bit of a snooker nerd, a bit of a fan, so it's been fantastic for me to listen to you. So thank you very much for coming in. I hope you have a great rest of your season, and good luck on getting the tour card.
Thank you very much.
And I hope you smash it out the park, mate. Well, thank you so much to everybody for listening to this first hour of the show. We'll be back in the second hour to discuss some local sport, including seeing how Lincoln City are getting on. See you then.